Etheric implants and entities are human nature. Part 1. January 6, 2017 by Eric Rains. Symptoms of the system. After an incredibly intense energetic activation, I became aware, as clearly as you are reading these words right now, of a system that had completely infiltrated the human condition, yet was almost 100% invisible to detection. Almost 100% of the population of the planet is walking around completely unaware that most of the talking they are doing in their heads isn't talking, but listening to something else speaking in their own internal voice. They are completely unaware that almost all of their habits, routines, impulses, and reactions are not theirs but an invisible puppet master's direction, willing them to develop these neurolinguistic pathways, NLP, through 24/7 monitoring and countering of any resistance to the invisible agenda. An invisible puppet master controlling the human collective and directing it to their negative agenda? Right off the bat, we have already jumped the ship from sanity. The immediate reaction is rejection, as there is no way that we, the most intelligent species on the planet, could be victim to something so incredibly prevalent and widespread, something that has literally tricked us into thinking we are independent and have free will, yet has imprisoned us on a level that is absolute. This reaction is completely understandable, and, honestly, to be expected. So, if you have made it this far and wish to not continue reading, this is understandable. The only request is that you analyze this feeling inside of you, notice how strong it is. Question that. For those who wish to continue, let us explain how this works, then more importantly, why? Let us begin with the known elements of this system. Through confirmed science, it is already understood that there is much more going on than meets the eye. Visible perception is what is called visible light, or the rainbow spectrum of color: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. This light spectrum is 5% of the full measurable spectrum of light. Broken down, what this means is that we can see with our human eyes only 5% of what there is to be seen. What has not yet been confirmed conclusively by hard science is the fact that we are multidimensional creatures with multiple forms of a body on many different energetic levels and densities. The physical body is only the vehicle to move through an incarnation. This physical form then branches into multiple fields and energies: the energy body, the auric body, the meridian body, the astral body, the dream body, the plasma body, etc. These other densities and planes of existence are hidden from us because we simply cannot see these resonant light frequencies. All we can see is the physical plane. We can, however, feel them. When you have an individual begin the awakening process, they soon realize that the world is fundamentally upside down, backwards from the way it should be. They begin to recognize consumerism and fear being pushed on the general populace. This new awareness leads to a need for information that leads through the darkest happenings of the world, then eventually out the other side with the understanding that we are here to shine a light into this darkness. Individual acts of kindness and compassion become small-scale ways to do something, anything in this world filled with so much darkness and yet so much light. As the individual going through this awakening begins to feel good inside, to love everything and everyone unconditionally, regardless of how others might behave or act, their physical body begins to react to these higher vibration emotions. They begin to connect into the energetic systems that we all are able to activate and utilize. Oftentimes, this dreamer wakes up to the higher energies accessible through meditation and movement of chi, and, then, the extrasensory abilities are explored more and more as they start to write the world right side up. Take this generalized example into consideration. Most who have gone through this awakening journey have gotten to the point of regular meditation and focusing practices, yet they can never seem to go into their explorations as deep or as strongly as they know they should be able to. Their connection to God/Source/Dharma/Tao/Jesus, whatever they call the Creator, is never as full or rich as it should be. The single-pointed focus and silence of mind that they read about and know exists always seems to be beyond any amount of practice and focus. While manageable, their thoughts often distract and lead them away from self-discovery and practice, most especially when sitting down to do said meditations. Random aches and pains in the body will start popping up, causing further distraction and fear of something physically wrong with the body. The practice of doing these exercises and energetic practices every day will get more tedious and harder to do. Until one day, the awakened dreamer stops the practice. A week later the awakener is becoming the dreamer again, perhaps not even thinking about the regular practice they used to do until months later when someone mentions something that triggers the remembrance, which dissolves like a layer of amnesia in a, "I remember I used to do that, and it made me feel," moment. A sense of wondering, a questioning of, "Why did I stop? I felt like I was younger, smarter, stronger, and more in tune, how did I forget?" starts, resulting in the awakener beginning their practice again, running into the same issues. The difference this time might be a friend, co-worker, boss, employee, family member, significant other, or landlord suddenly starts a fight or causes a problem for what appears to be no reason other than they were irritable that day, or things in their life were going roughly. Suddenly the awakener is thrown back into the knee-jerk reactive behavior that they had identified at the beginning of the journey, without any restriction whatsoever. Suddenly their life is tossed upside down, but the strangest thing is, as all the dust settles, everyone involved is left with the strangest empty feeling where there was once a molten ball of fire. They are left confused, wondering why they were so mad and reactive. If this sounds like it could have been written about you, you are not alone. If anything, you are in a much bigger and broader company than you would have thought possible. This is a textbook blueprint of shutting down someone on the path of awakening. When certain vibrational frequencies are met inside the body through DNA activation, direct energetic activations such as strong, intense visualization/meditations unlocking closed-off areas in the energy body, extreme positive emotions such as love, joy, or happiness, contact with the individual's soul family, the capacity to perceive and manipulate a broader range of frequency opens up, and, possibly, they begin to be able to interact with the energetic blueprint of the reality around them directly. Continued progression upon this path will allow their perception and ability to move energy to become much more broad and engaged to the point that they begin to literally see these control systems that are used by higher dimensional, negatively oriented entities to push and prod humanity in the direction of darkness, despair, hate and desperation. These control forces do not want that level of awareness, so they cut off the journey through direct interference, be that etheric, or triggering events/people in their life before that awareness comes into full fruition. This virus that has infiltrated every aspect of our lives needs complete secrecy and anonymity to continue its work, which is feeding off of dark, twisted emotions that come from extreme trauma, victimization, scarcity, and torture. Someone who is not on the path to awakening, but is focused on the distractions of the matrix prison system will never become aware of these systems. They consider the symptoms normal. In all honesty, these symptoms are normal in the sense that we grow with them from childhood, not understanding that the thoughts, impulses, and reactions that are blindly followed internally are not truly us to begin with. Someone stuck in the rat race, who is terrified of coming up with enough money for next month's rent, all while trying to drown their growing sense of foreboding doom of their position in the harsh world around them every weekend in alcohol, drugs, and sex, are not focused on turning on the light inside. Someone fighting for their life in a war-torn country is not stepping through their fear to take control over where their reality is directed. The poor soul enslaved in the global sex trafficking trade is not radiating their love to the world. The person who is winning the game of life is not focused on bringing everyone up with them, but in gathering in as much as they can for themselves and theirs. The people in between, those who have enough to live comfortably, but not enough to be independent of the systems, are focused on keeping what they have, not looking out to include everyone. These dreamers are not focused on expanding their awareness with love and compassion. Instead, they are focused on waking up, going to work, coming home, going to sleep, waking up, going to work, etc. Every facet and niche in the gorgeously diverse tapestry of humanity has a control system directing them in their specific place in society to keep the machine running. Consume. Buy. Fear. Terror. Them. Us. Watch out for number 1. The entire system is designed to keep us away from awakening the magnificence inside of each of us through our connection directly to Source. Yet, incredibly throughout history up until today, inside of each of these niches people are snapping out of the lethargy and waking up. The body is designed to consciously create the reality around us when fully realized, by being anchored in the lowest of all the vibrational planes. 3D physical density, then reaching all the way up through the dimensional causality directly to the creator of all that is. We are, literally, designed to be creator gods. In a natural system with no restrictions, we should be able to manifest physical reality in real time. That connection is why we are here. That connection is why we have been shut down to perceiving these layers and densities, yet can still interact with these higher vibrational energies, or crystalline resonance. They take us, the incredibly powerful beings we are, blind us from true sight, turn our environment toxic, heavy, and dark energetically, then with some controlled trauma and some negative backlash to start off, they begin the self-fulfilling cycles of atrocity breeding more atrocity exponentially. Locked away, by our collective selves, under the negative agenda guiding us from behind the curtain, we as the human race have festered and rotted at the core of who we are. Indifference to suffering and hunger and lack of shelter, warmongering, militaristic capitalism, aggression, consumerism, perversion. All of these things that highlight our focus on only the self turns our creator energy dark and stagnant. These low vibrational emotions become negative polarity higher dimensional energy, which these puppet masters need for their very survival. They need it for food. For sustenance. Note, etheric implants are also known as archonic or archontic implants in reference to the archons, a name given to the negatively oriented etheric entities that took over our reality by the Gnostics. Archon in Greek means ruler, and I personally do not resonate with calling them that and so rarely do. I agree 100% with Cameron Day, they are parasites and bloodsuckers of the highest order, ticks and fleas if you will. There it is. The answer to the question, why is the world the way that it is? Why are there children dying of hunger and lack of clean water? Why are there non-stop wars all across the planet at all times? Why is there so much hate and exclusion? Why is there so much scarcity? Because it causes us to emit extremely dark, negative emotions in reaction to our dark, negative environment, and these entities need this energy to survive. That is the key. They need complete secrecy because if we realized we had leeches or ticks embedded in our skin, we would extract them. The same principle applies here. They are in our energetic fields and bodies. Our bodies. Once you become aware, they are nothing more than a parasite needing to be removed. Once you become aware of these systems, you become aware of how vast your body truly is. You are not limited to the inside of your skin. You are much more than the flesh that houses your soul, and this awareness allows you to move what is yours. If you want your field clean, you can clean it, and they are terrified of you figuring this out. Typical symptoms of this etheric control grid are as follows. Feeling low on energy, no matter how much sleep/good food/water is had. Non-stop chattering in the head, making intentional silence in the mind virtually impossible. Inability to release trauma despite potential years of therapy and logical processing. A distinct, inexplicable feeling of being a puppet or of always having a mask over authentic self. An emotional numbness, an inability to feel emotion or an inability to feel positive emotions. Inability to pull away from an addiction. A tendency to choose stagnancy instead of moving forward. A feeling of being alone or cut off from God/Source. More inclined to have negative self-talk about self and the people/places around. Strange, disturbing, often violent thoughts that seem to come unprovoked from nowhere. Recurring nightmares or violent night terrors, specifically with things done to the dreamer that they have never encountered before. A heavy feeling of apathy, or lack of motivation to make life better. Lack of understanding and compassion for other people and themselves. A general cloud of confusion as if in a fog. Feeling lost in life, unsure of life's purpose. Excessive predatory behavior, physical, sexual, emotional, mental, psychological, or energetic. Easily able to fly off the handle for seemingly small reasons. Obsessive, compulsive behavior. Lack of qi flow through the body. Inability to awaken innate abilities such as remote viewing, astral projection, clairsentience, etc. Inability to sustain a focused meditation, no matter how much work and time has been put into the practice. Constant negative judgment of situations, people, and places, aka the glass is always half empty. Strange or recurring illnesses that doctors cannot find a reason for. Chronic pain or weakness in the body. Empathic overload, such as feeling other people's emotions more intensely than the person feeling the emotions originally. Strange sensations such as pressure, burning, stabs, and movement under the skin. Feeling better for only a short time after energy work or massage/body work. A constant feeling of paranoia or pressure like something has to be done immediately. Sensitivity to rare stimuli such as the hum or finding Wi-Fi painful. A tendency to try to heal damaged people, self-damaging in the process and never reaching success in healing self or others. A constant need to visit places or people that were directly involved in trauma. Rationalizing narcissistic, psychotic behavior as normal when engaging in it or experiencing it done, but only after the fact. A constant feeling of being watched. If you feel like you have experienced a myriad of these symptoms, you most likely just considered them to be strange at the time, or weird, if you ever even noticed them as symptoms. These are symptoms we consider natural and normal. They are not normal. We have grown up with part of our body actively fighting itself, because the cause is invisible to us. We accepted these symptoms as just getting old or that's just how it works. The reality is, the benefits of removing these etheric implants, parasites and entities are felt immediately. Some of the imprint or residue of the energetic constructs that were there before removal may take a few days to fully clear out and integrate into natural flow. A clear extraction removes all entity attachments outside of the individual, any negatively oriented constructs inside of them, etheric observers, astral body transmitters/tags, negatively oriented energetic attachments with other people, contracts, and false karma. The effects of said removal range in intensity from person to person. Pretty much the level of intensity felt after the removal is dependent upon how clogged and dirty the energy body was beforehand. If a person regularly moves qi through their body, meditates, eats clean and healthy, exercises, and drinks plenty of clean, pure water, they are going to have nowhere near the level of infestation as a person who does not practice spiritual hygiene would have. In essence, the cleaner a person is to begin with, spiritually and otherwise, the less they would feel the effects of a removal. Where on the reverse side, the dirtier the systems were before the removal, the more intense the experience during and after while acclimating to the natural flow and connectivity. Note, having your implants removed will not fix you. It will however give you the blank slate that you have been looking for, or a reboot if you will. The systems that have been fighting you from healing yourself and becoming a sovereign reality co-creator will be gone. The old habits and thought patterns will still be there, though much less intense and insistent. It is up to you, as it always has been, to do the inner work. Engaging old patterns and behavior will lead to the same energetic resonance that allowed implantation to begin with. There is no point to cleaning yourself off, only to go jump back into the mud. This is a beginning to the progression upwards of striving to be a better person than you were the day before. The only difference being, now you have an awareness of what your body is supposed to feel like on multiple levels without interference. That way when the parasitic construct starts trying to influence you in the future, you will be able to recognize it and clean yourself and your energy field out. Etheric parasites and entities might also not be the only reason for these symptoms. Much of the pain experienced is energetic in nature, yes, but a fair amount of it is trapped emotions, fixed/rigid belief patterns, trauma from past lives, damage to our bodies through consumption of poisons, processed food, fluoride, etc., or other things of that nature. For these things, there are multiple angles to find a solution from: coaching sessions are available for self-healing, but definitively, without the etheric implants, parasites and entities in your personal field, this inner work becomes much easier, relegated to simplicity. Less common symptoms of a removal. Purging of old, deep-seated traumas that have been held onto by implants formerly in the body. Lymphatic detoxification, free-flowing qi through natural pathways will open closed-off areas in the body, supplying it with fresh blood and lymphatic fluid. If there is a major area of toxicity that has been stuck, it will have to drain and be reprocessed to expel it completely, causing detox symptoms such as nausea, headache, chemical purging through the sweat glands, saliva, urine, and feces, etc. Emotional swings as your emotional body realigns with the physicality. Headaches as blocked energy pathways open up and gently erode, then push through blockages. Benefits and symptoms of having your etheric control systems removed. Immediate stillness of the mind, the only noise being what is actively being thought. Immediate relief from chronic pain and discomfort. The only pain in the body should be from active physical damage. If the pain is not energetic in nature or is blocked by a self-imposed barrier, the pain will lessen significantly, but not go away completely. Emotional balance or centering away from extremes. Confidence in decision-making or choices, with a noticeable certainty and quickness of information analyzing, culminating in lightning-fast decision-making times. A clear feeling of being connected to God/Source. A clear feeling of being connected to the planet. Focus of mind, free of fog or confusion. Often disorienting after coming out of an energetic stupor. Increased dream recall with a drastic increase in positively oriented dreams, nightmares become either very rare or non-existent. More comfortable in the body, easily letting situations that would get a rise before pass by with a smile. Increased qi flow through unblocked, clear meridian systems. This keeps the organs clean and in optimum working condition, meaning increased health. Much easier to walk away from vices and addictions that seemed impossible to give up before. DNA activation, turning on dormant abilities such as clairvoyance, telekinesis, remote viewing abilities, clairknowing, distance energy transmission, etc. This is dependent on the level of frequency that can be accessed through personal work beforehand. Once reaching a certain level of resonance, DNA spontaneously activates in the body. Often a removal is more than enough to raise the vibration to that level of activation frequency. Relationships with friends, family, co-workers, and significant others even out, becoming much brighter, full of camaraderie and laughter. Less likely to self-sabotage, with less negative self-talk presenting itself. An ability to handle situations that come to throw a wrench in the works, gracefully and efficiently. A noticeable increase in the strength of energetic shielding and psychic protection. Greater body awareness and understanding of how the flow of vital life force energy works. Deeper feelings of connectivity and love. A greater tolerance and patience for people and situations. All of this can be verified through internal stimulation and growth. None of this as of yet using modern science can be verified. I use modern in quotations due to the veritable mountain of classified research and physics not available to the public. Only the subjective opinion of the difference in how the body feels almost immediately gives any clue to these systems. Until, of course, you can see them for yourself. That being said, let us expand upon the technical details of the parasitic construct and how it actually works. How the system works. First, we need to understand the construct of reality and how we interact with it, to gain an understanding of how every person on the planet can be affected by this invisible virus. Vibration is the key that holds our reality together. When exploring the magic of cymatics, or the study of wave phenomena, especially sound and their visual representations, we can easily recognize that the level of vibrational frequency affects the shape of the structure of whatever medium the frequency is being passed through, be it liquid or a sand-like material. When the resonance is turned up, shortening the waves of the frequency to make it a higher pitch, there are specific points where the waves converge in on each other in a harmonic convergence, or what Greg Braden calls a key threshold resonance. The shape then suddenly springs into a newer, more complex type of geometry. In this video, we can see multiple points of harmonic convergence in the drop of water shown here. This harmonic convergence is a key concept to recognize. Through cymatic study with substances that are extremely fine, like talcum powder or volcanic ash, we can watch how the dust of the wreckage of cosmic explosions, such as a supernovas, condense together to form planetoids billions of years faster than the actual event. The spiral nature of galactic construct is shown as well as the division of the cellular world, all through pumping a frequency through a medium. The ancient texts tell us exactly what holds our physical matter together. In the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was God. It is not a literal word they are talking about but a resonance. Creation is held together by the divine frequency, a harmonic convergence, emitted by the Creator. An explanation of this would be to look at the construction of reality around us. Our bodies are broken down into smaller systems that work toward the whole, such as muscle groups, skeletal structure, digestive system, various organs, etc. Going deeper into the construct, we realize that these systems are made up of smaller groups working toward the whole. Cells that carry out specific functions make up different groups in the body, i.e., the heart cells are constructed completely differently than the liver cells and carry out different functions. Looking deeper, we see that the cellular structure is made up of protein chains and amino acids that form different shapes and ratios with each other to create said cells. Here is where we start to see the similarity of the construct, as in these structures that make up the cell are all very similar, but form different shapes to create a different function. Going deeper we hardly see a difference at all. Atoms are made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons, and varying in number of said protons, neutrons, and electrons creates different forms of matter. An electron that existed inside of a piece of copper could just as easily exist inside of your brain. Going deeper, we see that the construct of the atom is something called a quark. Protons, neutrons, and electrons are made up of the exact same construct. As of right now, we do not have the technology to see what is inside of the quark, but the ancient Chinese knew, and they figured it out without the need for any type of technological equipment. Through the science of the mind, the movement of vital life force essence known as qi, and meditation, they figured out that the base construct, the smallest of the smallest piece to the construct of reality, the base that everything is built from, is qi, or energy. Matter is nothing more than crystallized energy held in shape by a divine frequency. When we speak, do we keep our voices monotone, never altering pitch up or down? Of course not, so why would the cosmic frequency be limited to only one tone? In the scope of all that is, would not every tone that exists be, well, in existence? The frequencies that are holding our 3D physical reality together are not the only octave on the scale. In fact, 3D reality has a vibration of the lowest, and heaviest density on the scale. The frequencies only go up from here. Here is where the harmonic convergence demonstrated in Greg Braden's video comes into play, not just in dimensional transition but in almost everything including personal activation. When you are able to achieve a higher and higher range of frequency, eventually you will encounter a harmonic convergence that allows you access to another level of awareness and abilities in regards to DNA activation as well as energetic activation. The consciousness in an environment is vibrating at the rate of the environment it is in. If that consciousness shifts its frequency up the scale high enough to reach the point of harmonic convergence, it will begin to resonate the frequency of the higher level of density that is on the other side of that harmonic convergence, thereby shifting the environment it is contained within as well. The consciousness will not go anywhere, it will just suddenly shift from one density to the new one it has attuned its frequency to. That is the demonstration of consciousness shifting to a new state of being. But what is that new state of being? If we were going to look at our 3D reality as the number 3, the closest density shifts upward would be the scalar and plasma fields, akin to a 3.1 or so. Higher up we would reach the astral realms, crystalline grids, heaven realms, etc., with each level separated by a shift in frequency, or a barrier of harmonic convergence separating out places and realms that exist in the exact same space, yet interact with no knowledge of each other. This goes on higher and higher through density layers until we reach the gap between 3.9 and 4. For the sake of argument, most understand our 3D reality as being in 4 dimensions because of the measurement of time and space, so any jump up in our state of consciousness higher would be into the 5th dimension or 5D, but I am going to go from 3 to 4 here for convenience sake. When we reach the threshold between 3.9 to 4, the harmonic convergence of each density layer fits together in a magnificent mosaic of frequency and geometry into a single, grand convergence. This grand convergence integrates all aspects of the convergences of the density layers below, one linking inside and around the ones before, one convergence after another, till the consciousness steps through the grand convergence into a new state of being, or what is known as ascension. Each transition through a new convergence is vastly different, as each one has new rules of reality and new physics that must be learned. Stepping through from 3.9 to 4 is as different as it can be from each of these little convergences. Our minds can barely grip onto the edge of understanding of how 5D is constructed. Everything we know and understand is completely null and void, leading to a whole new path of discovery and upward progression through the density layers of 5D. Here is the major difference between us and most of creation: we are in all octaves of source vibration at once, only interacting in the physical, as we have been shut off from accessing the rest while in the physical. This is a basic outline of how frequency and density/dimension works in our reality, and when I say basic, I mean that there might be a 3.3859 that doesn't exist until a consciousness passes through 3.3858. And causes 3.3859 to spontaneously snap into existence, or a consciousness using willpower or technology to create a pocket of 3.574 where only 3.01 should exist. Trying to put these shifting, ephemeral planes of existence that do not operate with our knowledge of physics into a linear understanding such as a number system is a crude representation, not to mention that we honestly do not have words to describe these things. It is along the lines of trying to explain what Beethoven's Fifth sounds like on an Etch-a-Sketch, but we at least have some basic understanding of how the density layers are meshed together along the same frequency, just in a different octave. Understanding the broad, basic aspects of how this invisible system exists only leads to more questions. The scope and size of the entire construct is truly astounding in the magnitude of influence and the sheer amount of angles it presses in on. For the sake of simplicity, we will be focusing in this article on the scalar and plasma planes, seeing as how they are closer to physicality than any other density, and thus, where most of the etheric control grid is operating from. The scalar field. The first detection of the possibility of scalar waves was made by Scottish mathematician James Clerk Maxwell, 1831–1879, during his research into magnetism and electricity. His work was completely discounted by his colleagues who were setting up the university courses of physics to be taught to the populace, due to the fact that there was no way to study the scalar waves. Maxwell's hypothesis showed that waves of light much finer than microwaves not only were a possibility, but almost a certainty. Maxwell described these superfine wavelengths as existing in what he called the ether, and as there was no way to study it, his colleagues dropped that part of his research from the curriculum of physics they were putting together. If it were not for the famous Nikola Tesla, not as famous as he should be, scalar wave technology would likely not have been explored for decades after him. Nikola found that by using electricity and tapping into the magnetics of the planet, he could transmit scalar energy to a receiver wirelessly with no evidence of power transmission. It was as if the power traveled through a wormhole or a conduit through space/time. The most exciting thing about this wireless power transmission is that it was over unity, or free energy. Since the device collected the energy directly from the ether and the scalar fields, there were no wires to run the power through to measure the amount used, and that meant there was no way to keep a monopoly on the power and charge people for its use. As you can see when you look around, we do not live in a wireless world. Telephone poles, transformers, and power centers are everywhere powering our grid. Tesla lost all funding and backers for his research, and Edison ended up using Tesla's own discovery of AC current to power the electric grid via hydroelectric dams, and meters and wires started to stretch across the modern world. The technology that Tesla was developing was stolen and placed in black projects kept secret from the general population after Tesla died penniless and uncelebrated. Wireless power transmission wasn't the only trick up the sleeve of scalar technology. When generating a beam of scalar waves, not much different than say, a scalar flashlight, not much happens when you point it at something, but with two devices triangulating on a specific spot, suddenly a whole host of options appear. The energized area isn't just a triangulation of scalar beams going one way, but information travels just as quickly in both directions, oftentimes faster than the speed of light. Audio surveillance from anywhere within the range of a scalar listening device would be impossible to shield from because the sheer minuscule size of the scalar wave, it is small enough to penetrate any matter. Visual surveillance in a limited resolution would be available using this device as well. Using that same technology, you can transmit audio to any location in the range of the device, say for instance directly into someone's head, voice of God technology. Larger devices could be linked to satellites to bounce scalar beams in a triangulation under the surface of the Earth, causing earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and geothermal shifting. Large devices on the ground could bounce scalar waves off of the atmosphere to heat up areas in the troposphere, bubbling the Earth's atmosphere outward and using that massive air displacement to shift the course of the jet stream, thus manipulating the weather. Focusing down the beam, akin to making a flashlight into a laser, and fixing multiple devices to triangulate on the same spot flash heats/ionizes the molecules into the next relevant density, plasma, making massive balls of electrified, magnetic energy/light. This can be used to hyper-ionize the air in a specific area in the atmosphere. These are just some of the examples of what the scalar technology can do, and quite a few are pretty familiar with some devices that work on the scalar frequency such as HARP, which combines scalar and ELF, extremely low frequency, devices on a massive scale. Less commonly known is that Gwen towers, pictured below, also are scalar field generators, but on a smaller scale. These, instead of being focused, put out an ambient field for surveillance and tracking purposes. The next time you are on the freeway, count how many of these you see. Keep an eye out for the ones disguised as trees as well. The research done by Tesla was taken, improved upon, and then used first against other nations, and then against the actual populace. Weather control and warfare, unlimited surveillance. Think about the movie, The Dark Knight, where Bruce activated the surveillance technology that used cell phone waves to listen in and see everyone, everywhere inside of Gotham, targeted attacks on an individual with complete plausible deniability, ability to create earthquakes and other crust disturbances, and drought proliferation is some of the research hidden behind black-budget objectives and high-level corporate projects designed by an elite group of people with the agenda of complete control over the general populace, and for the most part, these scalar weapons are highly effective. The surveillance capabilities are without peer, and the ability to threaten any populace around the world with a natural disaster is an ace in the hole that cannot be discounted. Here is the funny, not so funny, part. The men and women who proliferated this system had no clue that they played right into the invisible control system's plans. They were literally programmed, pushed, and prodded to get these systems up and running. Under the guise of being the highest level of control technology available on the planet, devices around the planet were set up to make this scalar field much stronger to extend the strength and abilities of these devices. Gwen towers were set up. Facilities such as HARP were built, satellites that link scalar fields and blanket the planet were activated, the entire Earth was saturated with scalar waves. Whirlpool eddy currents that bypass space/time bathed the planet with hardly any areas that were unaffected. I do not know when the etheric control grid was set up for sure. All I have on this subject is what other people have taught, and what I have explored and felt energetically. The grid was allegedly set up tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years ago, and scalar orbiters such as the Black Knight satellite were set up around Earth, and specific Lagrange points around the solar system to spread out this scalar blanket through our solar system. What I have personally experienced are entities that at the minimum are 20,000 years old, and are most likely are probably older. I do not have any dates or specific times I can point to, but I know for a fact that they have been here for at least the last zodiac cycle, or 26,000 or so years. In essence, the grid has been here for a long time, but with the recent developments in technological advancement related to scalar weaponry, the field is stronger and more prevalent than it has ever been on this planet. The control systems of entities and implants operate inside of these scalar and plasma fields. With the explosion in strength and range of these fields, the strength and range of the parasitic construct has grown exponentially to levels never seen before. The scalar field is a natural occurrence, but with the technology used to stretch open and spread this field, our planet's scalar realm is distorted and engorged to many times its original size. The technology easily mutates the scalar density hundreds of times its natural prevalence. Instead of what should be metaphorically similar-sized layers in an onion, there is a thick cloying layer pushing out and completely immersing us in it, making it much harder to access anything beyond it. The scalar field is massive as a result, as well as being one of the closest realms to the physical density, which is the reason scalar technology works so well in the physical world. This is the exact same motivation that entities, parasites, and implants have to propagate there, the closeness to physicality. They cannot be seen with our visible light spectrum, yet they can interact directly with the body. The plasma cloud. We understand to a certain extent from a physical perspective some of the properties of the other layer most commonly used by the etheric control grid known as plasma. In order for plasma to exist, ionization must occur. This means that an atom must gain a positive or a negative charge by either gaining or losing electrons. Plasma is a very interesting fourth state of matter, the other three being gas, liquids, and solids. If only 1% of a gas is partially ionized, 100% of it will exhibit plasma-like qualities such as being responsive to high-voltage electrical conductivity and strong magnetic fields. The more of the atomic structure that is ionized, the higher the plasma density becomes until 100% plasma density is achieved. Naturally, plasma exists in forms such as lightning, St. Elmo's fire, the aurora borealis, upper atmospheric lightning and the polar wind. In the cosmos, plasma exists as stars, interstellar nebulae, solar wind, and accretion disks. We do not fully understand why plasma is the way it is, we just know that it behaves in specific ways, enough so that we were able to harness it for things like glass plasma globes, glass balls that are filled with noble gases slightly ionized by a high-voltage electrode, that utilize cold plasma, extremely low ionization percentage, plasma TVs, fluorescent lamps, and arc welders. We also produce plasma during fusion research, re-entry into the atmosphere, the sheet of what looks like liquid fire, with ion thrusters and rocket exhaust, arcs on a Tesla coil, and oddly enough, the sparks made from static electricity. All plasma is measured on the Kelvin scale due to its extreme temperature, but there are multiple states and properties to plasma in its myriad forms, thermal and non-thermal plasma, hot and cold plasma just to name a few. This odd state of matter has some incredible properties once the plasma initiation has actually been achieved. You can contain plasma with magnetic barriers, and any state of plasma is highly electrically conductive. What is not widely known is that there is a field of plasma in and around the entire Earth. When we interact with it, we are causing it to show evidence of itself that we can interact with, but just because we do not see it does not mean that it is not there. This means that there is a cloud generated by the magnetic field of the Earth that is extremely conductive and already in place naturally. I am not clear on how we used to interact with this plane. It might have been for a collective consciousness storage bank such as the Akashic Record, or a telepathic internet if you will, but we have an aspect of our energy bodies in the plasma realms as well as having the plasmic density being extremely close to the 3D physical reality. What the negative forces have done with this field is use it similarly to the scalar density, and used it to actually buffer the scalar field all around like a shell, becoming part of the veil separating us from the rest of the galaxy. It is not used so much for surveillance as it is a weapon. Attack from the plasma field is not typically common, but when it is occurring, the most common symptoms are burning, stabbing, crawling sensations in various parts of the body ranging from the top of the head all the way down to the toes. Colored smoke and odd lights might be seen as well. Plasma implants have a completely different feel from the scalar implants. Scalar implants are oftentimes extremely sticky/stretchy, a wriggling mass of tentacles, solid balls of malevolent consciousness, etc. Plasma implants feel almost like living fire, electric consciousnesses, gravity/magnetic consciousnesses, or conscious smoke. Adjustment of approach needs to be made when dealing with either, but it is as simple as attuning your energy to what feels like the same tactile sensation as that specific resonance you are removing. An example would be, for something that feels solid, to wrap up a solid, golden orb of chi around it, and using a solid, heartfelt push, extract/pull it out. The solidity is to match what frequency the implant is working from, and the bright as the sun gold light is to match the exact opposite frequency of the implant, which is so dark and black that it exudes shadow similar to fire creating light. The heartfelt, knowing push needed to induce the chi flow through the area, disconnecting anchor points and in essence catching the etheric device in a flash flood of chi that dislodges it. Implants can be pulled out without a flood of chi in the area, but are much easier to pull out with it. Imagine the difference between grabbing a piece of wood floating on the surface of the water, or a worm, burrowing into its hole. For something that feels smoke-like, or ephemeral like fire, the technique would be to feel the lack of solidity to it, and match your own chi with an ephemeral/hollow feel, and phase it into that type of frequency. Instead of a solid/hard ball of chi, it would be a weightless, brilliant ball of golden flame, the hollow/weightlessness of the fire chi to match the plasma frequency it is operating on, and the brilliant gold to counter the dark resonance frequency. For a magnetic resonance, you would charge your chi with a magnetic charge, which is as simple as just pushing back against it the same way it is pushing against you, and using that resonance to wrap it up in magnetically charged brilliant golden chi. Electric would be a shift to golden lightning you weave into solid structures. In my experience as a healer who removes and teaches people to remove these systems, I have found interference on multiple levels of density, with multiple, unique to the person etheric devices. There are easily 30+ frequencies of implantation I have interacted with, but for the vast majority of etheric removals on the 2,000+ clients I have worked with to date, I have found most of the interference in the scalar and plasma fields, with a preference for the scalar in proportion. Outline of the parasitic construct. Note: I am not going to get into the role of the physical extraterrestrial species in this outline other than major events such as invasions. Many negatively and positively oriented extraterrestrial forces have been interfering with our history and ability to direct ourselves for thousands of years, and many of the negative species were under the direct control of the etheric archontic forces. Most notably are the reptilian species, ranging from small, 3 lower castes all the way up to massive 15-foot tall upper castes. Corey Good has made mention to his interactions with this particular species, and he refers to them as white royal dracos. http://www.sbhirabayingalliance.com. The other, most common ET species dealt with in regards to the etheric implants are the insectoids, most often mantids. All of these ET species exist consciously in their astral bodies to some extent, some quite weakly, some with much more affinity and strength. But unless abductions are part of the agenda for that particular person, astral attacks are all most will encounter from an ET species. This is the reason I felt it not pertinent to include too much information about the species visiting the Earth. There are multiple insiders, researchers, and whistleblowers who are much more well-educated and experienced in that regard than I am. In regards to the physical human forces of the negative agenda such as the international banking cartels, Illuminati, military-industrial complex, etc. I will refer to them as the Cabal, which existed in some form or another throughout history, but has never been as more exposed and in the open as it is today. Here is in essence the construct of the system in a rough outline of its entirety: programmed, asleep, shut down humans, existing in all realms, only able to experience the 3D physical without what is known as ESP, extrasensory perception, are walking around in a sea of ultra-tiny wave particles that higher dimensional negative polarity consciousnesses use to swim through. The scalar and plasma densities reach everywhere on the surface of the planet, and while we think our population of 7 billion is large, literally trillions of these entities exist in these almost physical realms. These negatively oriented consciousnesses are completely disconnected from the Creator. They need to consume energy to survive, and they do not have an unlimited connection to Source, such as we do. Survival is in essence the name of the game. They need our unlimited energy to feed upon, but the problem for them is that this energy in its pure form would completely unravel and dissolve these entities that are aligned directly opposite to the source frequencies. Think light and shadow. Shadow is only an absence of light, and the tiniest amount of light can immediately pierce through the largest amount of darkness. Faced with a need for sustenance, these parasites ingeniously sneaked through the back door. They became our mind. They needed sustenance, but not in its original form. They needed to take our natural connection to the Creator, and turn the energy dark, stagnant, and black. This is where the traits that we call human nature began to worm their way into the collective consciousness of humanity, the push and urge to selfishly take and hoard. The blind rage and loss of control that allows murder. The worming ache and nagging constant of jealousy and possessiveness. The burning need and drive to hold power over others. The fixation and obsession with perversion. This is not us, this is us listening to the systems inside of us, designed to perpetuate this behavior. In a reactionary society, programmed towards the negative persuasion, one intentional act of atrocity has ripple effects from person to person. As the atrocity breeds more atrocity, new generations of suffering and anger arise, and the cycle continues on, getting bigger and stronger each cycle, as each successive generation explodes in worldwide population. Again, I do not know for certain, other than what people have taught on the subject, because I was not there. I can only go off of my experiences. When I tune into the past, looking for an answer to why we, as highly advanced, telepathic, almost immortal reality creators, allowed something like this to creep in, all I get is a monstrous collective wound of planetary proportions. The lore is that the destruction of Atlantis was caused by pride, and working with multidimensional technology that was not understood. The whisper of pride was one of these parasites, what grew into what we call an archon, tiny, flea-like, almost non-existent, constantly whispering in this man's own internal voice. Constant self-talk about the magnificence of what he had created already in his work, being dwarfed by his latest goals, and the pride of an ego awakening to visions of grandeur ended up flaming him, full of righteous confidence in his ability to transform the lives of his fellow man to unimaginable heights with energies and technology that could not be understood from this side. In his hubris, he pushed forward and it led to the destruction of the continent of Atlantis, and devastated the rest of the world. Evidence of this destruction can allegedly be found around the world in the ancient legends from dozens of cultures worldwide, about a deluge, or massive worldwide flood. Even a multidimensional physical being, capable of understanding the laws of attraction and the mathematics and geometry of the construction of reality, cannot come through the destruction of over 99% of the population of the planet, with the death of their way of life, friends, and family happening in front of them unscathed. This caused massive, collective, worldwide trauma, and I do not know if this is the true story of how it happened, but something on that scale had to have occurred for the festering, jagged wound that was felt around the planet to have been made. After such a massive trauma on the worldwide scale, the survivors were full of terror, pain, heartbreaking anguish, hopelessness, and desperation. In other words, a veritable feeding frenzy for the negatively oriented parasites. The thing about being without a physical body, is that unless transformed into source energy, the spark of God inside of us, or restructured by source energy, the negative entity can continue doing what it is doing indefinitely. Along with quasi-immortality, the more energy consumed, the bigger and stronger the entity gets. What ended up happening is that with all the dark energy they were feeding on, they became quite strong and were able to shut down many major energetic pathways, set up veil technology that cut the survivors' descendants off from natural cosmic ascension energy, genetically shut down the DNA from any perception other than physical senses, quarantined the planet from the rest of the galaxy, with threats of complete planetary annihilation if positively oriented forces interfered, and installed a system of controls such as the etheric implantation grid, and easily the most heinous of all the atrocious actions they have committed, installed a soul trap to recycle humanity back into the system over and over again. This system tricks you into believing that you are reuniting with deceased friends, family, and loved ones, where you rest in lower astral realms, that have been set up to appear similar to the dogmatic belief of heaven, or the afterlife for that particular culture and individual. After a time, your guides tell you that you have more karma to take care of, things left undone, and much to learn back in the physical plane, and not knowing any better, the person going through this system gladly comes back. The only catch being, that before incarnated back into a physical body, the soul essence is subjected to an incredibly powerful electromagnetic etheric pulse that wipes memories of who they are, what they have learned, and why they are here. They are not informed of that particular bit of information, and have no idea until it happens, which by then, is too late. The cycle starts again from birth. The soul is indoctrinated into a dark, heavy environment, experiencing traumas as a result of the system set up to perpetuate atrocity, and becomes infested astrally with parasites and devices, that are constantly distracting them, and constantly nagging and tempting them, towards the negative path, until they grow old and die. The entirety of their life, they never once realize that they have been used essentially as livestock. The soul essence gets recycled back into the system, and the cycle begins again. Generation after generation the human population grew, and the levels of influence these systems had became stronger, more entrenched. Technological advancement was kept to a slow crawl, and ruling classes were set up. Most often the way this happened, is that the person who proved themselves the smartest, strongest, most brutal, efficient, and cutthroat of the population would either through force and enslavement, become a warlord, or be chosen by their peers to lead them. Generations would pass and the offspring of the former leaders would be groomed to take over their position when their parents were dead, or another person would stage a coup and take over, to place their lineage on the throne. Positions of ultimate power were given to men and women who were already predisposed to lower vibration emotions such as jealousy, lust, and rage, as well as their descendants. Eventually, as the DNA of these lines mutated due to the negative, service to self nature of their goals and agendas, as well as some genetic tampering, there came a point in time when the physical people themselves hit a vibrational resonance, low enough to allow negatively oriented higher density beings to incarnate directly on Earth. Even to this day, the ruling elite are almost draconian in their preservation of their bloodlines, and this is the exact reason why the archonic forces can incarnate, or take possession of them and interact directly here in the physical. Agents, or direct incarnations of negative entities, were sent to the surface population whenever the vibration of the collective consciousness started to lift up, and mass tragedies, wars, natural disasters, and famine were the result of the negative agenda given flesh. This would always propel another generation of atrocity breeding more atrocity. As the wounds of the last crisis healed and people began to come together, the human race would be hit with another tragedy, constantly reinforcing a cycle of fear, violence, murder, terror, and war. Monetary systems were introduced, creating a dependence upon a controllable source to buy the necessities of life such as food, water, and shelter. Monetary systems on their own are fairly convenient for trade, but when these slave money systems were introduced, the banks installed a system of creating something out of nothing, known as interest, while loaning out money they did not have. This led to inevitable scarcity for some, luxury for others, leading to societal classes and prejudice. Jealousy, greed, and selfishness are intrinsic in this slave monetary system, and this mind trap keeps people inside of it focused on gathering as much as they can simply to survive, while keeping the attention on the base, survival instincts, never looking up and out to ponder the big questions of consciousness, such as, why are we here? Suddenly, there is a method exchange intrinsic to survival that will get people to do things they would never do if a lack of money were not an issue. In a 3-year research study done by Keith Chen in 2005, he taught monkeys the concept of money, and sat back to watch what would happen. Prostitution and stealing were almost an immediate result. As time progressed, the etheric implantation technology became much more intricate and precise, and the strength of the matrix programming became stronger and stronger. The repeated traumatizing of the population multiple times each generation after generation had led to a closed-off creature, blind to the magnificence of their existence, yet convinced of their own superiority. The population was programmed, via the collective consciousness, to create the reality they were all experiencing along the blueprint of the negative agenda. In our recent history, we can look back to the Dark Ages, the age of ignorance, fear, prejudice, elitism, selfishness, and hate to see the archonic agenda. Free thought was violently persecuted, independence was squashed, life was short and brutal, and there was no way out of your situation you were born into. You either succumbed or died. Everyone who knew differently either could do nothing about it, or were recycled back in the incarnation trap and came back with no remembrance, and thus humanity was trapped from all sides, possibilities, and angles, fully believing they are free inside of the ultimate prison construct. There was a study done, again with monkeys, about learned behavior. 5 monkeys were given a banana on a string, reachable by a ladder. As soon as a monkey would step foot on the ladder, the researchers would spray the other monkeys with ice-cold water. After a few tries, the monkeys quickly realized that if any of them stepped foot on the ladder, the consequences were immediately being sprayed with the water, and they all started to ignore the banana. The researchers then replaced one of the monkeys with another that had never experienced the cold water, and of course it immediately goes to the ladder to grab the banana. The other monkeys immediately attacked the new one, and after only a few tries, it figured out the consequences of touching the ladder were to be attacked by the other monkeys, and the new one began to ignore the banana as well. Another monkey was replaced with a new one, and again, it immediately went to the ladder to get the banana, and all of the other monkeys, including the one that had never been sprayed, attacked the new one. After a few tries, the new monkey ends up ignoring the banana as well. The researchers ended up replacing all of the monkeys, so that none of them had ever been sprayed by the water, and yet, each of these monkeys would attack their peers as soon as they touched the ladder, having never experienced the original trauma that created the behavior. What was the end result? A prison population that had been traumatized into specific behaviors with no understanding of why or how, other than the majority is doing it, so they fall in with the herd mentality and become part of the self-sustaining system. This is the same type of process the negative agenda used to traumatize humanity away from behaviors that would lift up the vibration of the planet, making it incredibly uncomfortable for dark forces to exist here, things such as altruism, compassion, humility, service to others mentality, contributionism, benevolence, and generosity. This is the process that, headlined by agents of the dark, drove our society into a fear-based, consumerism-driven, war-profiteering military-industrial complex. This is the process that ignited the darkness, self-perpetuating more darkness, into our reality. This was done by turning the prisoners in the system into the wardens, knocking any one of their fellow prisoners who jumps off of the path of the system's version of normality, back down to reality. The dark agenda grew and flourished, with humanity for the most part none the wiser. There were scattered pockets of ancient mystery schools that were keeping the old understandings and knowledge alive, passed down from generation to generation, but many of them were hunted down into extinction. One such example are the Gnostics, who remained completely shrouded in the fog of history until 1945, when 13 codices containing over 50 texts were discovered. The Gnostics understood how our planet had been taken over and had many in-depth understandings and techniques to resist the control grid in the rediscovered Nag Hammadi texts. The name they discovered or gave to the major archon entity that took over the planet is Yaldabaoth, a massive planet-sized, octopus-like entity that has wrapped itself around the world. Most of the ancient mystery schools that exist until today have survived as secret societies and organizations directly set up by agents of the positively oriented light forces trying to break humanity free from their invisible prison. Some still remain pure in the knowledge and agenda they went underground with in ancient times originally, but most of these mystery schools have been infiltrated by the dark agenda and have been hijacked or co-opted to lead consciousness in the opposite direction. Controls, grids, implantation systems, entities, negative agents, captive incarnates turned dark, all of these things, generation after generation wormed and clawed its way into the heart of humanity, surrounding the prison on every single layer imaginable, from every angle conceivable, with every variable thought of and accounted for, with multiple backup plans that had multiple contingencies and backup plans for the backup plans. The result was complete domination and control. No longer was humankind connected to the stars and able to understand the mysteries of the cosmos. No longer did we have complete control over our physical vessels. Our innate abilities to connect mentally and telepathically with the rest of our species were turned off, and our perception of the universe was narrowed down to a minuscule fraction of what is should be. We were deliberately, and maliciously cut off from connecting in with all that is. The creation could no longer touch and talk to the Creator. There was no escape, no way to fight, no way to even understand that we had been imprisoned. We had been put into the strongest trap in creation, and we could not even see the walls. Even with all of these systems of control, however, something amazing was happening. True human nature, kindness, benevolence, grace, compassion, love, courage, and generosity remained under the surface, occasionally bubbling up like oxygen rising through tar. The amount of effort and energy put into stamping out and annihilating these traits would absolutely astound anyone who could actually see the control grids, yet they not only persisted, but flourished. In the darkness, people succumbed and surrendered to the pressure, but there were few who refused to bend. They refused to let the world turn them savage and nasty. Even if spit upon, they would still show compassion and kindness. They were the lights in the dark, and they were some of the bravest of the brave. Alone, with no one to stand beside them, they lived their lives as specks of brightness in the sea of monstrosity, and returned again and again through the incarnational trap, holding that barest resonance of pure light frequency. They knew not why they did what they did, other than internal conviction and a feeling of how not right things were around them through each incarnation, over and over again. Despite the world telling them that kindness for the sake of kindness and charity for the sake of charity are worthless traits to have, they could not shake their convictions. If the world was a dark and brutal place, if anything they felt as if their little acts of kindness and light were even more important, and they were. These were the men and women that reminded humanity that beauty existed, that love mattered, that magic was real, and hope blossomed. These were the men and women who kept the human race from being completely subverted and taken over. Even if the people did not understand the feelings that resonated inside of them when they received these blessings, or heard about them, it mattered energetically in the way that water matters to someone dying of dehydration. They were able to hold on for all of us. They held on until help could come. When the call went out for positive polarity higher dimensional entities to voluntarily incarnate on Earth, countless beings volunteered. As the energies were on specific cycles of creation, nothing could be done until the end of the zodiac cycle, which is roughly every 26,000 years, and a massive pulse of creation energy charges the solar system with higher dimensional frequency. Here is where people claim that we had been imprisoned for multiple zodiac cycles. I do not know if this is true or not, but I do know that they have been here since the beginning of this cycle. Apparently, what had happened is that the Earth never ascended in the past completions to the zodiac cycle. Gaia consciousness, or the soul of the Earth, would not allow herself to ascend without us, and so never allowed the energies to begin the activation. Again, I cannot say if this is true or not, but it feels right to me. At the end of the cycle, an energetic pulse would sweep through the solar system, activating ascension energies. Positively oriented consciousnesses would begin the progression up through multidimensionality, and souls that were of a neutral or negative polarity would need to repeat the physical density incarnation process. This energetic activation would be the catalyst that would flood the etheric and astral realms with source light, making the entire planet in all of its etheric aspects impossible for the negatively oriented entities to exist here. As the culminating evolutionary energies that are supposed to lead to natural species ascension and activation began to increase and grow, the surface population responded by increasing exponentially, and things such as the Renaissance and the French Revolution occurred, breaking the iron grip of the cabal's forces over humanity as the population became much too large to micromanage on the physical level. What ended up happening is, with the explosion of the sheer number of people on the planet, many were incarnated who had already graduated from physical density. These people were some of our most influential thinkers, philosophers, philanthropists, entrepreneurs, artists, authors, and lovers throughout history. These were the people, known and obscure, who through random acts of kindness were able to put a smile on a face. These were the people who realized that they had more than enough, and looked toward raising up their fellow man. These were the people who ignited a fire inside the populace to love, to laugh, to learn, to understand, and grow. These men and women were a catalyst, carving a step into a sheer rock wall that would allow the energy to anchor in stronger. Generation after generation came and passed with more and more beings stepping out of multidimensionality and coming back to physical density with the light resonance imprinted on their souls. You cannot make a soul forget what it has already experienced, and beings incarnating from the 7th and 8th dimensions were coming into their bodies not physically remembering anything, but their soul resonance radiated multidimensionality, pushing open that tiny corridor of light resonance and slowly, ever so slowly, began to widen it. The dark forces began to recognize they were losing control of the situation as the Industrial Revolution began to revolutionize the potential of the human race, freeing up time and promoting more intellectual thought. As attentions began to focus on the occulted history and the powers of the human body, archontic forces did everything they could to promote it as witchcraft and demon magic, but interest and attention grew. People started to question the church, and other forms of indoctrinated tradition. Schools of free thought and innovation were established, and systems were set up to freely distribute information. Lack of information is darkness, access to information is light, and as this informational form of light spread throughout areas of humanity, gradually the collective consciousness began to stretch its accepted paradigms. In the way the collective consciousness and co-creative reality around us works, if enough people truly believe something, then it becomes acceptable to appear in reality, and gradually more and more things were manifested into creation as the population exceeded its first billion, and as the population grew, so did the level of information and technology till the point that humanity manifested itself an artificial collective consciousness/telepathic link in the form of the Internet. Throughout this energetically reactionary growing process, the dark forces had been trying to hold onto their systems of fear, domination, and control in the only way they knew how: fear, domination, and control. The level of enlightenment on the planet marched in lockstep with the level of darkness and atrocity as the First World Wars were engineered to allow further enslavement and control of the individual person. The energies would rise up and the dark agenda would hijack it and turn it stagnant or against what the movement stood for to begin with. Case in point is 1969 and the Summer of Love. There was supposed to be a major energetic flash/activation in the early 70s that culminated in ascension energies in the 80s, and the Summer of Love was the precursor that would spread out around the world to facilitate this energetic upgrade. The cabal engineered Charles Manson and what became known as the Manson family, to ritualistically torture and murder 9 people at 4 different locations, most notably Sharon Tate, wife of film producer Roman Polanski. This act of violent blood magic shocked the collective consciousness that was expanding outwards in love and compassion. At the same time, agents in the movement itself were turning it into a drug-fueled orgy with no objective. Do not get me wrong, there was much that happened in this era that evolved the consciousness levels around the planet significantly, and we would have much work to do without this era in our history, but eventually it accomplished nothing with momentum in the physical, as it was designed to. Wars, engineered by the people who were supposed to be keeping the populace safe, were breaking out around the planet, and vast sums of money were changing hands over the war machine given free rein. Governments funded false armies claiming to be working for specific religious or idealistic values, while in reality working under the orders of said governments, creating terror and confusion. Chemicals were now heavily pervading the environment, through the food, water, air, housing, and manufacturing processes, causing disease and lack of energy. The populace became heavily medicated on psychotropic drugs that changed the brain chemistry, painkillers that cut off full range of emotional accessibility, vaccines that were supposed to keep people healthy, legal drugs such as alcohol, caffeine, and nicotine that opened the energy body up to attack, non-legal drugs such as methamphetamine, heroin, opium, cocaine, and MDMA that could allow resonance that allowed direct possession takeover of the individual, which also came with a built-in excuse to imprison people. Plant medicines such as marijuana, peyote, ibogaine, psilocybin mushrooms, and ayahuasca were illegalized and demonized of any healing potential, cutting off access to much understanding and learning from nature. Multiple angles were tightened and control systems were buffered and strengthened, trying to propagate the fear, power, and domination they controlled for as long as they could remember. Note: many of these suppressing actions and technologies took a major upswing in intensity and strength after the 1996 Congo invasion, where millions of negatively oriented physicals invaded Africa. After this invasion, chemtrails, HARP, extreme surveillance, CERN, slave trafficking, and torture all made massive increase in prevalence and frequency. Cobra goes into much of this at his blog found at http://2012portal.blogspot.cz. What is happening now, is that cabal has been holding back the water for too long. More keeps pouring in, and there is only so much you can do before it breaks the levees, pours over the dams and floods everywhere. The tighter the control systems they have put into place, the stronger the backlash is as the control system snaps. Case in point, recognition of the etheric control systems. These have been completely invisible except for isolated cases for millennia. Now, they have been recognized and actually removed by tens of thousands of people around the globe. With the inclusion of the Internet, the information about these systems has grown to a level, never before in the history of the negative agenda, more in the open and available for anyone looking as ever has been. The truly exciting part is that the information is spreading faster and further the more the energy spreads. Soon, this will be fairly common knowledge, and etheric implant removal will be as common as Reiki is now. The game has been realized, and the end result is already set in stone. Humanity has already won, we only need to continue spreading the information, and more importantly, shine the light. This understanding changes everything. Nothing is ever the same after you recognize the true reality of the world. Not only does this point to the hidden hand directing humanity, this is direct confirmation of the amazing abilities built into the DNA of humanity, the amazing abilities built into you. Interactions with people will never be the same again. Arguments and conflicts can easily be sidestepped because of information that was once the biggest secret of our reality, is now in the open. Once recognizing that most of the people you will encounter are responding to a negative agenda they believe are their own internal voices, impulses, and urges, this opens many doors of awareness and understanding. The ability to move through your life with grace and compassion is still something needed to work towards, but it becomes much more simple and easy to do, simply for the fact that you can respond to the control systems, not the person. By responding in kind with the frequency given to you by the control systems, you are stepping into their realm, and doing exactly as wanted. By choosing to directly speak to the parasites and implants under a specific program prodding, the conflict in the person in front of you, you can short-circuit the whole cycle and leave the momentum of anger or jealousy stutter-stepping in place with the triggered person wondering why they were so worked up. It takes practice, but even when rudimentary effort is applied to this effect, results are noticed almost 100% of the time. Sometimes those results are not what we were looking for, however. In Part 2, we will be going over in detail the implantation systems I have encountered, negative entity types, positive entity encounters, positive implants,